Welcome everyone to this webinar for Australian Potash, ASX code APC. Shortly I'll introduce Managing Director and CEO Matt Shackleton, who will provide an overview of the company's recent activities. Following the presentation, attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions directly to Matt during a live Q&A session. So as the presentation is occurring, think about what questions you would like asked and submit them in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I will put them to Matt during the session and we'll get through as many as we can. Okay, let's get started. I'd now like to introduce Matt Shackleton, Managing Director and CEO of Australian Potash, who will run through a formal presentation and, as I said, be on hand to answer any questions you may have at the end. Matt, over to you.
Morning, David. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Morning, attendees, and thank you for giving me some time to run through where we've got with APC to date and where we plan to go over the next 1, 2, 3 quarters to the end of this calendar year. I'm sure everybody's aware that Australian Potash has had a reasonably torrid last 12 months or so, but what we have done is very successfully come out of an administrative process. We've restructured our balance sheet. We've put some capital into the bank account. We've rationalised our creditors and debt position. So what we see at the moment with Australian Potash is a very clean entity, sitting with a market capitalisation of about $4 million, with approximately $2 million in the tin. There's a reasonably high number of shares on issue. Obviously, that provides investors with a great leverage to upside from the exploration endeavours, and we anticipate what we are going to be doing out in the West Arunta with our Nexus project, and also what we're going to be doing with the Lake Wells Gold project east of Laverton will have a material impact on that share price over the next 3, 6 and 9 months. The company at the moment comprises 3 project areas. There are 2 that we focus on, which is the Lake Wells Gold project east of Laverton in Western Australia, which sits along the gold-endowed, proven gold-endowed Yamana Greenstone Belt. We've got about an 80-kilometre strike of that Greenstone Belt. Our nearest neighbour is Gold Road Resources. Their ground is contiguous to us in the south, and obviously there's probably no need to introduce Gold Road Resources. Everybody's well aware of that company's success in the last several years. We will be mobilising a drill rig to our gold project at Lake Wells on Monday, the 27th, so in 3 or 4 days' time, and we anticipate that rig will be spinning on a Wednesday, the 29th of May. The Nexus Rare Earth Lithium Niobium project, this is a project that's just fascinating and intriguing for us. Based in the West Arunta in Western Australia, again, the West Arunta is, unarguably Australia's hottest exploration property at the moment, by virtue of some of the sensational drill intercepts that the likes of WA1 and Endeavour and so on are getting out of the ground at the moment. We're surrounded by neighbours who are drilling into mineralised deposits. We're seeing a suite of intriguing geophysical results being published. There is, the region is probably one of the least geologically understood regions in Australia, but the amount of exploration work that's going into it at the moment, you wouldn't expect that to continue for very long. So in summary, we've got a very clean balance sheet, restructured capital structure, restructured board with 2 very, very strong projects to go forward with. Board management, I've been with Australian Potash for just over 10 years now. I'm the CA, and I've joined APC 2014. Obviously, the vast majority of my time with APC was spent getting the Potash project from discovery up to pre-development. Again, probably no need to rehash what happened to the nascent SOP sector in Western Australia. Nevertheless, we sort of retained a large slab of the ground that we've got out at Lake Wells, and it now comprises that gold project. Previously, I've been the MD of a number of other resource companies, including Arunta Resources, which had a project at the eastern end of the West Arunta origin. Kathy Moises has been with us for a few years. Kathy is a geologist. She comes from a finance background principally. Kathy is also our non-executive director for Arafura Resources. And finally, Jono Fisher jumped on our board as we came out of administration. A couple of the other directors we had on our board going into administration, their background is in development and operations. So, as we were returning to an exploration strategy, it was time for them to move on. And Jono jumped on board with us, which is great. Jono's currently the CEO of Cauldron Energy. And for those of you who are interested in uranium, that's an intriguing story to follow, given what's happened to its market capitalisation over the last 12 to 18 months. Our top 20 shareholders control about 40% of our stock. We have over 3,500 shareholders. All of the top holders on our register are private individuals. Mark Creasy's there at Yandal, Finman, Cassett and Complete Constructions. Those gents all either underwrote or participated in a large way in the recent capital raising. Again, just to summarise where that's at, so we've been listed since December 2011. We relisted on the 7th of May this year. The docket that got us out of administration, that was put forward by me. So you can obviously tell that I'm wedded to the company. I'm one of the largest shareholders as well. And I'm here certainly to endeavour to drive the exploration success at Lake Wells and Nexus. So what about the Lake Wells Gold Project? This was one of the early projects for the company. And once we identified the potash, we went off and did that. But we joint ventured out the gold project at Lake Wells. For those who aren't familiar with the Western Australian geological terrain, particularly the Archean craton down here, it's crisscrossed by 5, maybe 6 greenstone belts. And it's along those greenstone belts that, materially all the gold in the eastern goldfields is found. Now, the Yamana shear zone is a greenstone belt. The Yamana greenstone is the 5th eastern greenstone belt and possibly the least explored at this point. It's a very large area. Some people have compared it to the Timmins camp in Ontario in Canada, which is home to about 100 million ounces of gold. That's about the same scale as what we're talking about here. So we've got a massive area of ground. We control about an 80-kilometre strike of it across 13 granted exploration licenses. Our nearest neighbours, Gold Road Resources. The intriguing thing about where we are at Lake Wells is that it took Gold Road quite some time to understand the exploration model that they needed to follow out at the Yamana. What Gruyere is a very large, it's a porphyry deposit, but it's very large and it's low grade. So it wasn't discovered really through a lucky drill hole, a la some of the eastern goldfields deposits around Kalgoorlie. It was instead found through a very systematic and methodical geochemical process, effectively. So the number of metres of air core drilling that went into tracing down Gruyere was extraordinary. And it took a couple of years because what it really was chasing down some geochemical soil anomalies. So arsenic's the big tracer element for gold deposits out here in Yamana and obviously elsewhere, but particularly out here in Yamana. And it was that trend that the exploration geologists ultimately ended up following to find Gruyere. Now, there are 2 areas that are mineralised out here at Yamana. There is the Gruyere porphyry, for example, and porphyries, generally speaking, can exist solo, but there is often more than 1 or 2 porphyry deposits in an area. But the second area of interest for us is the actual shear zone itself. So the Gruyere deposit sits off the shear zone on a little bit of a spur called the Dorothy Shear. But the Yamana shear zone, which is the big area that runs up through our deposit and down through Gold Road's ground, that is the home of what Gold Road referred to as the Golden Highway. So Gruyere sits somewhere down here. Now, it is obviously sitting off the shear zone, and it sits in a bend in the rock, very similar to what we're seeing up here in our eastern target. The two areas that are interesting to us out at Lake Wells are, first of all, we want to go and have a look at this bend in the rock. We really need to understand bends equal weakness, equal fluid flow, potential gold mineralisation. So we're following an arsenic trend that appears to be leading us this way, and it coincidentally is leading us into what appears to be a structural weakness in the rocks. We think if we are going to be able to chase down a porphyry deposit, a similar kind of a thing to Gruyere, our biggest chance of doing that is going to be in this area here. So that's what we refer to as the eastern target. Arsenic and soil geochem tracer elements leading us north into a weakness and a bend in the rocks, potentially fluid flow gold mineralisation. The second area of interest for us, though, is this one. And now this is a proven gold mineralised system. So the Yamana shear zone itself is, like a lot of the greenstone shear zones in the Archean, full of gold. The question is the tenor. Now, what Gold Road have been doing over the last several years is that they've actually been drilling across this contact zone. So between the granites and the mafic rocks out here, on that contact zone, that's what they've been drilling across. And that's what they've been finding gold in. So that's what they're referring to as their golden highway. And so far, Gold Road have identified, I think it's 5 deposits that they're pushing through study programs at the moment to try and wrap some pits around. It would appear that their strategy would be to generate enough of these pits, get a critical number of producible ounces, and build another processing plant out there in the Yamana. So our second target is similar to Gold Road's. We're just going to push up across this shear zone. There's literally one drill hole across that shear zone in our ground. So all of the drill holes that went out here before, they all stopped before they got across the shear zone. It's a mystery to us as to why that was so. It's obviously some of the field geos interpreted what they were seeing differently to what we've now seen in assays. So we now think that by pushing across this shear zone, we're going to be able to replicate something akin to what Gold Road have seen down the Golden Highway. And just to give you a bit of a flavour for what this area is about, so you've got Gruyere out there, big porphyry deposit, huge low grade. You've got the Golden Highway, lots of deposits, smaller, some high grade. And then you've got this thing called Ibanez, which Gold Road drilled out. And Ibanez, one day they chucked out 10 metres at nearly 30 grams, which is just extraordinary. So the Yamana shear zone, there is lots of gold out there. There are a few structural controls that appear to be, controlling the deposit of that mineralisation. There's some geochem tracer elements that you can sort of seek to find it. But then you've got some weird stuff like Ibanez that pops up out of nowhere. Point being, there's lots of gold in the system, and we've got a rig out there on Wednesday. We've got 4,000 to 6,000 metres of drilling planned to pepper across that shear zone and hopefully chase up some of those arsenic geochem anomalies into potentially a porphyry zone. The second project that we've got out in the APC stable is what we refer to as the Nexus project. Now, this is in the West Arunta. The West Arunta is this fascinating piece of ground, or this origin, that's right in the guts. It's probably the most isolated mineral province in the country. I stand to be corrected on that, but it's very isolated. So you're about 1,200 kilometres east of Exmouth. You're about 700 kilometres west of Alice Springs. So it's right on the edge of the WA Northern Territory border, but it is active as it's possibly one of the most active regions in the country, for the simple reason that WA1 went drilling out there 2 years ago and drilled through a big carbonatite deposit that is rich in niobium. It's not just rich in niobium, it's very rich in niobium. Niobium is an unusual mineral, or an unusual element, I should say. It is used in various steel products. It allows you to make better steel, stretch your iron further. It also is useful in armaments and so on, steel hardening and whatever. However, very few producers of niobium on the planet. There are currently, I think, 3 or 4 producing operations around the globe, and it is a critical mineral on nearly every country's critical minerals list. So this is what spurs all the interest in when somebody finds a new niobium deposit. This is what spurs the interest in it. So there have been a few workers out here in the Arunta over the years. The ground that we got first belonged to First Quantum, and they were drilling it back in 2015. They were looking for a big sort of base metals, big ZX or IOCG sort of a deposit. They were actually chasing down nickel at the time, and they didn't see the nickel that they wanted to see, so they dropped the ground. What they did return into the public database was a series of rare earth element anomalies. So the holes that they've drilled on the ground, which is our ground, is that stuff in the green at the bottom there. The holes that they drilled there, nearly all of them are mineralised rare earths. Now, there are various considerations with respect to rare earths. Metallurgy is the primary controller as to whether or not a deposit can be deemed economic. And so we are some way away from being in a position to understand that. However, the other opportunity that we see with our Nexus project at West Arunta is to chase down some of the geophysical anomalies that some of the neighbouring workers are seeing. So, for example, if you look here, this is Rincon Resources. Now, what Rincon have been doing, they are on the hunt for a carbonatite, an IOCG, SEDEX, or something like that. They're on the hunt for one of those styles of deposit. IOCG, maybe I certainly know that the eastern end of the West Arunta origin is prospective for IOCGs because I used to run a company that had one. But then what they're seeing at their Avalon deposit is a geophysical anomaly that would appear to mirror what WA1's Looney deposit was found upon. So carbonatites can return a strong magnetic anomaly by virtue of the minerals they contain, and RCR are now interpreting their geophys as being very similar to Looney. So we've got Looney up the top here of the set of rocks, and then down the bottom here we've got Avalon. So I imagine we're going to see a lot more of that analysis come out for all this ground in here. The WA Department of Mines has just released more information about geophysical data sets that cover all of this area down to about here. So what we anticipate, as soon as we've finished our access and heritage agreement with the traditional owners, when we will be going through a process of analysing all that publicly available information, the geophysical information, and coming out with a better understanding of what the geology is likely to represent on our tenements. We're tracing down those rare earth, lithium, niobium types of geophysical anomalies, and once we've begun to identify that, then we'll get out on the ground and do some proper groundwork. The traditional owners out in the Arunta, so this is an Aboriginal reserve, covers all of the area, and it is an exclusive possession native title, has been determined out there as well. So the agreements that the traditional owners make are necessarily quite commercial. The advantage we have at working in that area, of course, is that there are lots of people who are working in that area. So the traditional owners have proven to be very approachable. They are very cultural people, so there's a lot of respect that does need to be shown towards them. However, they are open to the idea of people coming in to exploit the commercial minerals in the area. So we would anticipate being able to finish our access and heritage agreement with them presently, and on the back of that, we'll be out on the ground looking to execute whatever we are able to interpret from the geophys data sets. And just to give you some idea of the flavour, so if I was to put Rincon Resources onto this image, Rincon sits about here. So we're getting, about here, I should say. So, we're very proximate to a lot of these workers who are getting some pretty particular and interesting anomalies, both with the drill string and also from their airborne and their ground-based geophysics analysis. So the ground is fertile. We are about to own it. We will put out an announcement today that we have just taken full possession of the entire ground package. And so, this is one area that we are very, very excited to be looking at. I'd expect a news flow to start coming out on the Arunta in the next week or so. Just briefly, niobium, it isn't a rare earth. There's lots of speculation about rare earths at the moment. It's a transitional metal similar to tantalum. You may remember that tantalum was it's on the back of tantalum that Pilgrim Minerals managed to find Pilgrim Gora. Carbonatites often produce, niobium is often present in carbonatites by virtue of the way that they're deposited. So our project out there is very prospective for rare earth elements. We've already got assay results off our ground. So yes, it is prospective for that. We're seeing our neighbours identify and drill through geophysical targets that are proving to be rich in niobium as well. So to summarise, the next value steps for APC, we've got a drill program which we will commence on the 29th. So the drill rig's getting there on the 27th. We're mobilising camp into the drill site this week, and that'll be up and running on Saturday. We're going to do an initial 4,000 to 6,000 metres of air core drilling, and we're going to be targeting some newly interpreted walk-up drill targets. So again, one of the advantages we had some Barbaras out there joint ventured into the gold project for 3 years. They spent $3.5 million generating data. When Genesis took them over, they gave us that data back and walked away from the JV. We've combined that data set with ours. We've got the exploration manager from Gold Road Resources reinterpreting that data for us, and he's come up with one of the exploration geologists, I should say, come up with these walk-up drill targets for us. We're chasing that stuff along the shear zone, and we're also going to be driving up into this bend in the rocks to see if we can trace down some of this arsenic geochemical and soil anomalies. The community consultation with the rest of the Arunta traditional owners will commence as soon as we've got agreement on the draft access and heritage agreement. The draft access and heritage agreement is with the traditional owners' lawyers at the moment. That's up to version 3. So we would expect to be able to finalise that soon, which means that I'll be out there meeting with them, sitting down and talking about when and what it is that we can do on that ground. And I anticipate being able to do something there by the end of, if not by the end of this quarter, certainly by through the July quarter. We expect the assay results from the Lake Wells gold drilling to start coming through. We anticipate them being complete by September. We would expect them to start flowing by mid-July to the end of July. And then finally, the other thing that we'll be doing is in anticipation of having some successful discussions with the traditional owners out there, Arunta, putting forward a program of works for approval and to really hit the ground with machinery, possibly by the fourth quarter of this calendar year, and if not, by the first quarter of next. So that's a bit of a summary for the Australian Potash company now. You will note that it has been a tight time. We got through the deed of company arrangement. We got through voluntary administration. We've restructured our balance sheet. We're clean as a whistle. We don't have any debts or trade creditors that can impede us in any way, shape or form now. We're nice and free, and drill rig mobilising over this week, and then we're back out of the Nexus project in the Arunta. So thank you. Happy to take any questions you might have. Back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for a great presentation. And for someone who's been involved as an advisor to the industry for such a long time, credit to you and the team for bringing the company through what would have been a very tumultuous time, but bringing it through to a point where it is now and poised to grow again with new assets and a new focus. Tough time and a lot of, to be fair, a lot of companies would have thrown their hands in the air and said it's all a bit too hard and walked off in a different direction. But to sort of go through the tough times and put your shoulder to the wheel, I think you should be credited for. So congratulations, firstly, on that. Just along those lines, a question here. When do you look at changing the name? Do you think there's a time to change the name, given the focus and given the exciting aspects of where the company is now?
Yeah, look, it's definitely something that we're talking about as a board, and there is a school of thought that says we should wait and see which one of these projects is going to become the project, or we change the name to something generic. Now, we're not sure when. It will be soon, and we're not sure what to, as I say. For the time being, it's probably easier for people just to consider us as being APC. We clearly don't have anything to do with potash any longer. We no longer own any of that ground. So, yeah, name change on the agenda. What it's going to be, TBD.
Look, and there is, as I said, as someone who's involved in the marketing of listed companies, sometimes it's better to be focused on drilling than it is on changing names and looking at new logos. So if it comes to where to spend the money, I think I know where shareholders would like to see it spent.
That's right.
We do have quite a few questions coming through, so we'll just jump straight into them. What is it that your geologists have seen in the interpretation of Lake Wells and the data there that has led to the walk-up drill targets that you've mentioned?
Yeah, look, it's possibly what they saw out of the St Barb's data set. Now, again, just dealing with this shear zone, what we found when we opened up the St Barb's data was that some of these lines that they put in, they, first of all, they ended in mineralisation. So there's gold in them. We're talking sub a gram, but we're only talking air core drilling. So we're only talking, effectively soil profile drilling. The cover out here is quite deep. So they ended in mineralisation. And then and looking at the logs that they had generated as well, we actually think that some of the logs, the drill logs, were misinterpreted. So we don't believe that this line here, for example, is the end of the greenstone. We believe the shear zone sits to the west of that, because there's been a change in the rocks that have come out here, but they don't give the appearance of this granite body here. So, and it's exactly the same thing that happened down at Gold Road. What they found at Gold Road is they were getting these holes that they were ending in mineralisation that they thought were on the western edge of the greenstone. They pushed another 50 metres in, and bugger me, they weren't. They were still in the greenstone. They hadn't hit the granite yet, and they continued to get mineralisation. So that's the first thing. Our geos reinterpreted what St Barb's had done, said they stopped too early. They need to push further west, because the history of the exploration model out of the Yamana is just that. Keep pushing until you're actually seeing granite come out of the hole. You can't go any further because it's granite. And then you're off the shear zone, drill across it. The second thing they saw was this arsenic trend, and that's the real big one for us, because that thing shoots all the way up through here. And we think that we're chasing it down. We think it's getting more intense. And again, the Greer porphyry was found sitting underneath this very concentrated arsenic geochemical anomaly. So we're going to be pushing up. So that's what our geos saw. They saw that St Barb's stopped too early, and then they saw that, I think St Barb's, if they'd been given their freedom to stay in the joint venture, they would have done, because they would have closed these lines up and chased that arsenic trend down themselves. But, commercial world being what it is, they were told to close that joint venture down. So what we're going to do is we're going to do precisely that. We have the opportunity now to close up those drill lines ourselves. That's what our geos saw.
Another question here. How quickly do you think you'll be able to progress to targeting the West Arunta tenements, and in particular, capitalising on the interest in niobium?
Yeah, look, when we first pegged those tenements, it was my view that the only thing we needed to do was get out there with an air core rig and just, drill 1,100 metre holes, give or take, because that was going to give us an understanding of what was going to be what the geology was, what's in the soils, what's in the regolith, and so on. I think that model might have changed, because in the last 12 months, what we're seeing, of course, on the back of WA1 and Looney appears not to be a standalone. There appear to be repetitions of these carbonatites out there, which is, expected, apparently. But the exploration model has been to rely on the geophys, so the geophysics. So get some gravity and some magnetic surveys conducted across the ground, see where there's anomalous readings coming out, and then chase those down. That appears to be a very effective exploration strategy out here in the Arunta. So cast against that, there is obviously a fairly deep database of publicly available geophysical information available. Now, we wouldn't be, we need to have, we need to pay all due respects to the people who own the country and to their cultural requirements. So we're not going to be jumping the gun here and putting out all sorts of numbers and results and so on until those people are comfortable with who we are. But we are going to be able to access that publicly available geophysical information that sits across our ground and have a bit of an interp of it. And we're probably going to be able to get to that endpoint quite quickly. First step is to get the access and heritage agreement signed and executed, meet the people, and then I think the next step for us will be to come out with that geophysical targeting. After that, we get drill rigs on the ground.
And just further on from that, in terms of exploration at Nexus, what's the plans there in the initial stages?
Yeah, look, chase down, well, geophysics, identify anomalies, and then it really is, again, it's likely to be an air core rig because they're cheaper to get out, they're cheaper to mobilise, you can do a lot more exploration with it. And it would be of most interest and most effectiveness for us to drill across. For example, we've got, I mean, this is a geological interpretation, so this is not necessarily accurate, but to drill across a lot of these structures, structures here to see whether or not we're getting mineralisation popping up along there. Again, we're going to be driven by what the geophysics tells us to do. But, largely speaking, generally speaking, I should say, it's going to be air core and drill up and down and trace up some of these high grade anomalies, but generally speaking, drill up and down. This tenement here, this western tenement, pretty much undrilled, no exploration at all, fresh, very similar to terrain to what we're seeing here with Norwest Minerals and this other eastern tenement of ours. So air core is what we will probably go for to begin with.
And just coming back to Lake Wells, how soon do you think it'll be before news starts coming out? I know you touched on it a second ago, but what does the news flow calendar look like in your mind?
Well, let's say we begin. Let's round it out to June. Let's say we start drilling on June the 1st. Our exploration team have got the instruction that as soon as we've got effectively a ute load of samples, then we get them into Kalgoorlie and we start that process. What we are hearing from labs at the moment is the backlog is nowhere near what it was last year. People are getting through the work quite quickly. Turnaround times, we anticipate somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks. We don't know what it's going to be like when we actually get there, but that's what we're banking on at the moment, planning for first assay results to come out, in that mid-July period.
And in terms of funding, what's funding look like? What are you conservatively budgeting for, and how do you think the run rate looks at the moment?
So we're doing an air core program at Lake Wells. Air core is pretty competitive at the moment, so we're getting that for about $22 a metre for the rig. We've budgeted about $400,000 to $500,000 for that program out at Lake Wells. APC is run very lean these days. We don't have a team of people that we need to maintain. We don't have corporate offices that we need to maintain. We anticipate the cash that we have in the bank, and whilst it doesn't look like much, all of us have been in the exploration business for a while know that $2 million doesn't last you very long. But the point I'm trying to make is that pretty much all of that's going into the ground. And so how long that lasts us is contingent upon what we see coming out of the hole at Lake Wells, whether we push on beyond 6,000 metres and how quickly we can get out on the ground at Arunta. But at this stage, it feels to me like we're going to be going on this money for, right up until Q4 of this calendar year for sure.
And off the back of, as you say, a fair bit of activity, which hopefully re-rates the stock and gives you another chance to come back and have a chat to fund the next phase of development as required or exploration as required. How closely do you think your neighbours will be watching what you're up to, particularly in the West Arunta, given how active they all are and crowing about each other's results? Do you think they'll be keeping an eye on what you're up to?
I would imagine that everybody's keeping an eye on everybody at the moment because we're all learning from each other. The exploration model is still being worked on. We've got some very good teams of explorers out there in the Arunta at the moment. People with decades of experience across the state, across the world, probably. And those guys, they're watching, they're learning, they're spending money. So I think all of the neighbours are looking at everybody and understanding what it is that they're getting out of the exploration strategies that they're adopting. Generally speaking, it's sort of geophysics driven at the moment. I can't see why that wouldn't continue given how cheap it is, relatively speaking, to get that data together and start your targeting process. I know for a fact that we follow closely, a number of players up in the Arunta, just to understand how they're going about their exploration.
And this is more of a statement than a question. The topic here says re-energized with strong leverage to exploration success. And the comment that's been made by one of your shareholders is you clearly look very re-energized.
Oh, good. Good to know. Oh, great. I'm glad I had a shave.
Well, re-energized management and a re-energized portfolio of assets that have a strong news flow ahead of it, which shareholders always love to see. Matt, no further questions. So thanks for your time for presenting today. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and submitting all the questions. A copy of the webinar will be made available over the coming hours. Thanks everyone for participating and have a great day.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody.